actually.
You started off at Hike, right now
Yeah.
you're at Hypernova. Yeah,
Yeah.
so he started off at Hike, right now he's creative director, CTO at Hypernova Interactive. Working there since I'm guessing 7, 8 years now at
Seven
Hypernova.
years.
7 years.
7 years. Yeah.
So welcome. Love to loved having you over on the meetup as well. Nice to meet you again. And guys, feel free to drop some questions regarding game design you have in the chat as well. I'll make sure that it's the most interesting ones to Huzaifa. Huzaifa, you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah. Thank you, Manas. Hi, everyone. Huzaifa here. I'm in Bangalore. We are like I'm working with Hypernova. Actually, me and my co-founder Mayur, we started together like 7 years ago, October 2015, and we are currently building India's largest open world mobile game called Maya Nagri, and we'll be making some really cool announcements very soon. You could say that it's kind of like the GTA for India, or its true successor, so to speak, right? However, we are here to talk about game design today, and I'm happy to field all the questions that you guys might have.
Yep, lots of questions already dropping in. Again, the most common ones like we were expecting already in the chat as well. Let's start off. Simply put, what does a game designer do?
All right. So if there are first of all many ideas of what a game designer is, right? In fact, just yesterday I was browsing Instagram and I saw an ad, ki, hey, become a game designer. And when I actually checked the course, the guy was actually teaching level design,
Hmm.
right? So really, game design is not level design. It's not art. It's not environment design. It's not narrative design, right? All of those things are exactly what they sound like. However, game design is about making the rules of the game, deciding how the game will be played, right? Like if you can define any game with three things, right? You can say that, okay, I have a mechanic, I have an obstacle, and I have a challenge, right? If you have these three things, you have a game, right? And then you can stack more mechanics on top. Okay, I can pull things behind and I can let them go, and now you have Angry Birds, right? Then you can stack more things on top of it. Okay, there can be some objects that explode upon contact. Okay, and now you have an exploding bird in Angry Birds, right? So this is kind of how what a game designer really does. He imagines a game and comes up with a rule set that is really fun to play and meets the product objective, right? So if he's designing a free to play game, his product objective is usually making sure that people play for as long as possible.
Hmm.
But there can be projects with totally different objectives, and he might have to optimize for those.
Got it. So, like you said, objectives might change, but
Yeah.
who does a game designer in the game
Mm-hmm.
entire development cycle work with
Mm-hmm.
in this
All
scenario?
right. So largely it depends on game designer is like saying I'm a doctor, right? You can be anything from a like a para or to all the way to someone who's super senior, right?
Hmm.
So I would just classify things like, okay, you could start off as a junior or an intern, right? In which case you'll be working with a senior game designer, right?
Hmm.
And usually a good company would have a lead game designer, and some companies might even have a director of design or creative director, right?
Hmm.
But the job remains the same, make the game as fun as possible, right? And a game designer is kind of like the MBA of all of game development. So I am a BBA graduate myself, and when I actually studied way back when, they taught us a little bit of everything. They taught us a little bit of finance, IT, accounting, you name it, right? So
Hmm.
the whole idea is that, hey, you need to know a little bit of everything that goes on in a business so that you can speak everyone's language, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of what a game designer is. At its core, a game designer is a communicator, right?
Hmm.
Because he's the guy who has the most amount of ideas, and he has to come up with a plan, right? Sometimes it's the architect, but he has to work with all the people who have the larger ideas, who have the vision, and he has to crystallize it to a point where he can go to a programmer and say that, hey, we'll need to build this module this week so that this feature can work. And then he can work with the art team and tell them that, hey, we need art made in this specification, right? So really, he's someone who has to speak everyone's language. Otherwise, he has to be the nexus point. Otherwise, the whole thing will break down.
Cool. So how does this information get conveyed, like to
Hmm.
a programmer as well as to an artist? Is there a method to it? Is there a certain criteria that you
Hmm.
look
Hmm.
for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it depends on the team size, really,
Hmm.
right? Normally, most the industry standard is a GDD or a game design document, right? Which is, in simple words, it's a Bible. Any game will have a GDD. Any large game will have a GDD, and the game designers write it so that, see, a large game typically takes 2 to 3 years,
Hmm.
right? And over that course many people join the team and leave the team, and you can't be, and the whole bible grows like fairly large, right? Like currently Mayan agrees bible is well over 250 pages, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So every time someone joins in, it's a very simple way for us to tell people what has been done so far and what are we going to be working on, right? So GDDs are what is used in larger projects, but I've seen so many indie studios and indie teams, one-to-man teams, right, where
Hmm.
the GDD is right over here, right? Because there's a programmer and there is a designer, or maybe there's just two programmers who are doing it, right? And in that case, I have more often than not seen that GDDs actually slow things down, because now you're spending half your time documenting things, right? And
Yep.
documentation is only as good as it's up to date, right? Because game design is an iterative process. Every time you change something, right? Okay,
Exactly.
okay, we just added double jump because we thought this bug would be a nice feature, right?
Hmm.
And there you go, it was there, but it's now not, it's not reflecting in the GDD, right? And it can confuse a lot of people. So documentation is one of the most core things that a game designer does. It's one of the most boring part of his job,
Yep.
but it's also the most important parts of his job. And to add to that, different game designers come from different backgrounds, right? Like I'm a tech head, I come from a technical background. So for me, the easiest way to describe, let's just say I came up with a new game mechanic altogether, right? So the easiest way for me to do it is I'll sit down in Unity, I'll prototype it in like a few hours and I'll just show it, right? There are people who are from an art background and they'll go ahead and they'll just draw a concept of the whole thing and they'll beautifully present it to other people, and people will get the idea like that, right? Because it's visually striking. Or there are people who are very good with their words and they can write something really crisp and strong, and they convey the idea. So the point is, whatever be your skill set, you can be an effective game designer if you just know how to communicate your ideas very effectively, be it through any means.
Yeah, but like you said, all three backgrounds can become a game designer. You came from a tech background. I was speaking to someone
Correct.
today who applied on the job portal as well. He
Mm-hmm,
was
mm-hmm.
also coming from a tech background, had worked on hyper
Okay.
casual games, etc. over the last
Mm-hmm.
1 2 years. Did not know
Yeah.
where to go next. Wants to get into
Okay.
game design, not sure. But
Mm-hmm.
do you think your technical knowledge is helping you convey your vision as a game designer as well?
So I think it goes way beyond communication, to be quite honest.
Yep.
So between all of the disciplines, I think the one that most benefits is an engineering background. To be honest, the guy you're talking about, he's
Yep.
most primed to be a really good candidate for a game designer. I'll tell you why. Because game designers are also of different types, right? Like you can have a game designer who's a ludic game designer or a more of a narrative oriented game designer,
Got
right?
it.
So by ludic I mean these are people who are extremely good with systems and math, and they'll work spreadsheets like anything, right? And they can come up with a system that is very tightly balanced,
Hmm.
right? So let's just say these are the people who are kind of like, say, Sid Meier, right?
Hmm.
He's a prime example of a ludic game designer.
Got
You
it.
don't see him tell very good stories or very, memorable stories, right?
Hmm.
Compare him to, say, someone like a Hideo Kojima, right?
Hmm.
He is, as we normally joke around in the studio, he's a movie director trapped in the body of a game designer,
Exactly.
right?
Now
he
getting
he
into movies as well.
exactly, exactly. So Hideo Kojima is a narrative game designer at heart, I feel,
Hmm.
right? They have their own charms, but the point is, as an engineer, you have if you have worked on a game, maybe it 1 or 2 games, right? You start getting a knack for how games work internally. You start understanding loops, you understand triggers, you understand events, right? And that is something that is going to help you write better specs, right? So instead of writing a spec, right? So by the way, spec means every time we build a feature in the game,
Hmm.
right? Like right now, someone at the studio, he was writing a feature about how does a player, when he's driving the car, how does he jump out of the car, right? Now there's a tons of research that went into all of that. The guy probably spent like 12 or 15 man hours worth of work on it, and then he consolidated everything into a specification, right?
Hmm.
And that specification, short form is spec,
Hmm.
goes through a review, right? It comes to me or comes to a senior designer. We sit down together, we brainstorm on it, we try to poke holes in the spec, saying, hey, what happens if there is another car sitting right next to this, right? Then what will happen, right? So we try to challenge the specification as much as possible. And once we've figured out that okay, this is strong, it can stand on its own, we go ahead and we publish it in
Gee.
the portal that we have, the
Okay.
GTD portal, and that goes to the dev team for review. They will see if it's feasible and not, right, right? So it's really a collaborative process, right? There is no single person who really writes everything and says, okay, this is done, okay, tata, bye bye. That's not how it works.
It sounds like an intensive process, right? But the
Yeah,
question would
yeah,
be,
yeah,
of
yeah,
all the ideas that you come up
yeah,
with, how
yeah.
many of them are thrown out and how many of them do you actually go and implement?
I would say most ideas. So, as game designers, we tend to fall in love with our ideas.
Exactly.
And I always tell younger game designers to not fall in love with your work,
Hmm.
right? Because it's a trap. If you fall in love with your work, that means you will keep investing in it, and you don't get increment. You get really, really marginal benefits the more you work on something, right? So you need to know where to stop, and that's where prioritization comes in, right? And that's another important skill that a game designer needs to have. Okay, we have only time to build 10 features, and we have a backlog of 100 features. What
Hmm.
are the top 10 features I can do to make this game,
Present.
make really great impact, right?
Hmm.
That's where the difference can be made, and usually most people know what will work the best.
Yeah.
But to coming back to your original question, right? Engineers, they tend to excel in game studios as a game designer, purely because they know the inner workings of an engine, so
Hmm.
they can write specifications in a way where programmers can very easily understand it. So
Yep.
instead of saying that, hey, when you press button A, the guy jumps, he will probably go ahead and describe an equation, right? He'll probably go ahead and describe how many units someone has to jump and what happens when a collision happens and so on and so forth, right? So
Yep.
you're a little more technical about it, and that is really the idea of being specific, right? That's why it's called a specification,
Yep.
right? So you don't decide, you don't describe something verbally, just like
Yeah.
that.
Plus, the advantage over here is that you know what the engine can do as well. So technically, you're not saying something that's completely unrealistic, and the programmer is like, "ये क्या बोल दिया?" How can
Exactly.
I do this?
Exactly. It really saves everyone a lot of time, really. It saves the devs a lot of time. It saves the product team a lot of time. I can go on.
Cool. Sounds good. So, like you said, you discuss about ludic designers and other
Yeah.
designers.
Yeah.
What kinds of game designers are there, and how
Hmm.
does one identify what kind of game designer one wants to be?
Okay. So, how does one identify?
So,
So,
Sid Meier, for example, people who
mhm.
don't know, just
Yeah.
if you know already, I would recommend dropping the name of the game in the chat. But if you don't, I'll help you out in a bit as well. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, yeah. So, again, how do you know if you are a certain kind of a designer? Really, there is no real litmus test for it. You will end up, the first thing I always tell any anyone who wants to be a game designer, right, is to
Hmm.
play tons of games. It's really just play a lot of games. You cannot be a good game designer if you have not played a lot of games. I can guarantee you that, right? And that's because you learn, and human brains, they are such that we observe and we learn, and even when we are not learning, we are learning, right? So a lot of, like, for example, a lot of UI UX work that happens in the studio, it goes through me. And I'm not a professionally trained UI UX designer, right? Like, I don't have that kind of a certification, but I do have something that I have picked up because I've seen good UX, right? So really, it boils down to developing a taste, right? If you have good taste, right? Like, there are people, I'm sure the same thing is true for movies, right? You go and you talk to someone who's not much of a movie goer, he will not have a very high regard for finer movies, right? As opposed to people who are really particular about where they spend that 1.5 hours of their life, right? So people, they'll research IMDb, they'll find all the reviews and the critics and all of that.
Hmm.
They want to get the most ROI out of that time, right?
Yeah.
So that's the mindset you need to have for also being a good game designer. You need to play games, and you need to be very, very open minded, right? You need to play all sorts of games, even if you don't like them. If you say that, if you see or find yourself playing a lot of, say, FPS games, you need to shock yourself out of it, and, I don't know, try some Candy Crush maybe, right? I
Hmm.
promise you will pick up a few things if you're open minded, and you will learn those, and you will be able to implement those things in your own games, and that will pay its dividends in the long run, right? So the best way to identify what kind of a game designer you are is really, first of all, play a lot of games, and you yourself will know what kinds of games, game ideas are you coming up with.
Hmm.
That's the litmus test. So for me, I realized that I was a ludic game designer because most of the times I was coming up with games for RTS games, or ideas for RTS games, or ideas for very puzzle kind of oriented games, things which require a lot of thinking, right? So that's kind of where my orientation is. And eventually, once you feel that you have reached a cliff, you will start moving towards the other end of the spectrum, which is what we are doing right now with Maya Nagri, right?
Hmm.
We have written like well over a 70-80 page script for the whole story. So right, so you will eventually do everything. It's only a matter of what do you do first,
Got
what
it.
do you learn first.
Yep. So you said one interesting thing, right?
Yeah,
That playing different games. I
yeah,
also personally, I am a complete single player adventure guy. So I play
yeah,
the game, I pick it up, I finish it, I'm done. Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But just to give myself a different shock, I
yeah.
started getting into board games.
Oh wow, okay.
So I there was
That's
a
a rabbit hole, man.
yeah, I there was a board game cafe that had opened up in my area. Like, let's
Okay,
go. Dikhte hain.
okay.
Oh, and when you enter, they ask you what board games you played. I was like Monopoly, Ludo,
Mm-hmm.
these all I know. And they
Yeah,
judge you like anything at that
yeah,
time. And
yeah.
then we'll introduce you to this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you played Wingspan? Have you played outside of these Catans and all? Have you played
Yeah,
proper games? Have you played Jaipur? I played Jaipur. I was like, damn, this was made in India. I did not know that. But
amazing.
yep. So outside of this,
Mm-hmm.
I understand and I play these games. Yes, I'm intrigued by them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but how do I
Yeah.
know that this is my skill set and this is what suits me as a game designer?
Okay. Mm, see, you need to, most people in life uh, will have things that they like and things that they're very good at. And sometimes they are not the same thing, right? I've seen a lot of programmers who really love to play games, who love to make games, but they come up with really, really bad ideas. Okay. So and I've seen the other way around as well. I've seen game designers who are trying to be game designers, but they just don't have the thought process for it, right? So I really feel that you should follow your aptitude more than what you like to do, because if you have the aptitude, you can actually put it to good use. Interest is something that either develop or something that you can build a taste for eventually. So I think that it's very important that you identify what your strengths are, and if you are able to find fun in being able to do that kind of work, that is where you need to go, right? So it's not necessary that because you started off as a game designer in your career and you're not enjoying or you're not doing good in it, that you have to stay that way, right? It's perfectly fine to switch careers. I've seen so many QAs become very good game designers, right? And
Mhm.
actually QAs make for very good game designers because they're very good observers, right?
Yeah,
So there you go, right? Like that's the answer to that.
got it. So, but skill set wise, like you were saying, right? For
Mm-hmm,
someone
mm-hmm.
who wants to design for Civ, whereas
Yeah,
someone who wants to design for a narrative based game.
got
The
it, got it.
spreadsheet angle versus the creative cinematography wala
Yeah,
angle.
yeah, yeah.
How does one get those skills?
Mm-hmm.
Plus, how does one know that I'm actually good at? So spreadsheet wala, I can
Mm-hmm.
somewhat I can picture that you have to be good at math. You have to be
Got
good
it,
at
got it.
understanding how balancing, load balancing, etc. works in a game. Plus studying
Mm-hmm.
the games that do it best.
Yeah.
But for a narrative design director, since you are a creative director as well,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
do you identify or pick up the skills to actually become a narrative director? Or-
So again, it boils down to practice, right? And this is the same thing when you're just getting started, right? Okay, hey, I don't know game design. I've never worked on a game. What do I do? Work on a game, right? Pick up a project. If you don't know how to code, find someone who's just getting started, just like you. I'm sure there are a lot of people in the outscale community who are of the pretty much of the same level, right? So you guys can team up together, band together, do weekend projects, work on hackathons. There's tons of these things going on, right? The idea is that it has to be a feedback loop, right? I always like to warn like young designers to be not very idealistic, right? Because what they are trying to do is they are trying to make design, but they end up making art. Now, there's a very nice quote which says, "Art is selfish, design is, is empathetic." And the idea is that when you make art, you're making it for yourself. You're not making it for other people. If other people get it, they get it, but that's not the idea. But a designer, if you go to a designer and you say that, hey, I have this friend and he's physically challenged, right? Can you design a chair that will be comfortable for him, right? He will put his own mindset and what is the concept of a chair aside, and he will start thinking about what it means to a person who is physically challenged, and he might come up with a very very good solution, right? So
Yep.
the whole idea of a designer is really to have empathy, right? A designer is supposed to be the champion of the player in the studio, right? So if and this is a fight that always happens in any studio, right? There will be the product manager who's like, hey, let's add this feature, we'll make more money. And there's the game designer who's like, you'll ruin my game, right? And
Yeah.
there'll be a fight between the two, and it happens way too often,
Yep.
right? And most people there is a huge overlap between them. So it's the job of the designer to be the voice of the player and to defend the game on behalf of the player inside the game studio, right? You have to think for your players because they are not here in the room, right? So that's how I think designers should go about it. I think I missed the other part of your question. What was the other part?
Basically, how do I understand where to begin? So, like I said, if I
Yeah,
want to be a creative director
correct,
and
correct,
I played those games, but I don't know
correct.
where, how to actually acquire the skills. So,
Got it, got it,
tricked by a mechanic in God of War, this axe throwing is happening
got
and
it,
it's coming back. But how
got
do
it.
I know how this was implemented?
Got it. So again, coming back to the art and design thing, you have to be a designer about the whole matter, which is
Yep.
you start building games. You'll make really bad games at first. Easily your first 20 games will be crap, absolute crap,
Hmm.
garbage. Okay,
Hmm.
but that's fine. You're learning a lot, right? You're learning a lot,
Hmm.
and what will happen is you yourself. need to enter into a feedback loop where you're not making a game for yourself. What you're really doing is you make a game, you go out there and you talk to more experienced people, right? You talk to players, you talk to designers, you talk to people who have made games before, right?
Yeah.
And they will pick on your game, they will poke holes and it will hurt a lot,
Yeah.
right? But you will learn from that. You will learn and then you will go back to the drawing board sometimes and you
Yeah.
will redesign the whole thing, and then you'll come back and then next time, instead of 5 holes being poked in your product, there'll be 3 holes, right? And then eventually there'll be 2 holes and so on, right, till your product is something that appeals to the kind of player you're designing it for, and that is where you hit success, right? And it takes time to get there. So don't ever get disheartened about it, but this is exactly the process of how you develop skills, be it narrative, be it ludic. All you have to do is start making those kinds of games, play a lot of those kinds of games, and really put yourself in very uncomfortable situations, right? You will have to make games that you have never made before, right? A lot of people will like, okay, I want to make XYZ kind of a game, and someone will probably mock you saying, hey, but even that company couldn't do it, how can you do it, right? But you have to look beyond all of those taunts and be able to overcome and develop those skills regardless, right? Everyone has a first time, it's okay.
I love that analogy you gave, right? 5 holes, 3 holes. Like the mentor inside me went, wow, what an example. But still, the
Yeah,
same concept I've seen get applied to our Launchpad program as well. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
ask people, like, give me your GitHub code, I'll review it live on the session, right?
Wow, okay,
And people will be like, no, I don't want to share. It's not written well. The repo is not updated yet.
okay,
Your repo. Trust
okay.
me, you'll get more out of it than just watching the recording later or watching some study material later, because real time feedback is, there is nothing like real time feedback.
Absolutely,
The point
absolutely.
is, I'm here to help you out. Let me help you out.
I,
Uh,
I couldn't agree more, man.
yeah, but again, this example, another thing one that happened once with me was, I just on a whim, I reached out to Naughty Dog's game engine programmer, right?
Okay,
Jason Gregory. He had written his own book for game engine architecture. I was like, I want to study this book, but I don't know C++.
okay.
Was all I asked him. And that was way back in like 2016, 2017.
All right.
And to my surprise, he gave me like 5 lines, a long paragraph of an answer. Like, this is what you need
Okay.
to do, this is how you can get started, etc., etc. But it's just,
Yeah.
the point is to reach out and network as much as possible.
You said something really beautiful right now. A lot of people in life, they disqualify themselves,
Yep.
uh, that, hey, I'm just a starter. Why would this person talk to me? Right?
Exactly.
Never, ever be ashamed of asking for help. Right?
Yep.
And you don't know how kind people can be. They can, it can be scary. I understand, but it never hurts to ask, man. What's
Yep.
the worst that will happen? They'll say a few words that did not that don't agree with you. It's fine, or they might not respond. It's okay, that person is probably busy, right?
Got it.
But it's your job, it's your duty as a designer, to ask someone who is more senior to you so that you can learn. That's all.
Got it. Cool. I think we are running out of time. My
Yeah.
final question would be like, if I want a job as a game designer, what
Mhm.
would you look for right off the bat outside of my resume?
The most important thing I actually look for is people who have clearly shown a growth trajectory,
Hmm.
right? So I can see that, okay, your first game was a Flappy Bird game, but now you're suddenly making something closer to, I don't know, a Super Meat Boy game or
Hmm.
some, and you have your own twists now, right? So what I really like to see is a trajectory, first of all, a growth trajectory, and that shows me the velocity at which someone can learn, right? So if I soak them in a very talent dense environment, like, so for example, in my company we have some of the finest designers in the country, right? You sit with them for 2 hours, you'll probably learn a lot more than you learn outside in 2 days, right? So the whole idea is that how much is this person able to soak, how quickly is it he is able to soak, And the most important thing I really do is, apart from checking out their work and checking out their trajectory, is their test. Um, the whole idea is, are they thinking how they should be thinking, right?
Hmm.
So usually that means a game designer, I will tell them, hey, I need you to come up with a game concept, or come up with a, say, a mechanic specification for this feature. Or I'll ask them to break down, take one of their favorite games, right? Say Fallout Shelter, whatever, right? Like, take one of your favorite games, and I would need you to do a design breakdown of this, right? The reason I ask them to do that is, I want to know what they observe, and are they seeing it from the angle they should be seeing it. And even if they are not seeing it, is it a knowledge gap or is it an aptitude gap, right? So that's really the thing I go for. I like to see people observe things others don't,
Got it.
right? That's the simplest thing I can say. I don't know how else to tell
Yeah.
you what I look for. That's like asking what you look for in a girl, right? Like, you don't know what you look for in a girl,
Yep. You just
right?
shoot your shot and see where it goes, right?
Exactly. You trust your instincts about a person, and
Yeah.
these are all the signals you should give any studio, right? That, hey, you work with me, I'll make sure that I'll do my life's best work with you, right? That's the feeling that they should get with you. But in our company, historically, we have hired people who have technical skills as well as design skills
Hmm.
or artistic skills. Basically, I never hire a one-trick pony. I always like to hire people who are multidisciplinary. That always helps.
Jack of all trades, basically.
Jack of all trades and master of one.
One. Got it.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So, how will we add all those things in our portfolio? I guess someone who wants to get their game reviewed as well. Do you have time, or we can like wrap this up as well?
Yeah, I think we can field some questions. Why don't we start?
Cool. So there's one person asking, how do I add all these things in my portfolio? The
Okay.
basically whatever you said, right? The growth
Mm-hmm.
trajectory, etc. How does one
Correct.
convey that in their portfolio?
Okay. Really, it's about volume of work.
Hmm.
If you go through, if you have 5 or 10 projects, personal projects that you have put up on GitHub, you have an itch.io page,
Hmm.
and you have demos that people can either see in a show reel, or just see, and you have timestamped those, right? I can easily tell, okay, this guy, he's been moving fast in his life, right? And that's really about it. So first is doing a lot of volume of work, be showcasing it at the right platform in a way which is very convenient, right? So if your game engine supports, put it up as an HTML5 game, so that when I just open the page, I can immediately play it.
Hmm.
Most people, and this is not just for one studio, I know a lot of studios, you send them your portfolio, most people will not open your work, because just way too much work to download a 200 or 300 MB exe, open it, run a virus scan, all of that, right?
Hmm.
It's just simpler if you give a video or a nicely compressed show reel that helps me see your entire work at an overview.
Yep.
Yeah.
Convenient. Basically, respect the
Other
person's
person's
time.
time.
Yep.
Very important. Very important.
Sounds good. Should we apply for job or learn and make more games? This one is like make more games so you can apply for a job.
Yeah. So again, that's actually a decent question, because it's a catch-22 situation, right? Like, you need experience to get a job, and you need job to get experience, right? It's that situation. The easiest way to break out of that loop, right? Um, I have always found that you can join very easily through a network, right? In fact, my first job I got because I knew people who knew people, right? So networking is more effective than you think,
Hmm.
right? Especially being friends with the right people, right? Because people want to work with people who are trustworthy, or who they think is trustworthy, right?
Hmm.
um, So I think that is one very key thing. Now, if you don't happen to have that network, right, what do I do then? I'm just getting started. I don't know anyone in this industry. The simplest way is build as little of a portfolio as possible that will allow you to enter a baseline game studio. You don't need to aim for the absolute top, right? You can start off as a junior or as a trainee in a company which is not the top of the line company, because different companies have different hiring criteria, right? For me, for our company, we usually expect at least two, maybe even 3 years experience, right? But there are companies out there who are into services for that matter, right? So services means they make products for other clients, right? So for them, the objective is not to make the highest quality work. For them, the objective is to make it in the cheapest possible cost, right? So they will happily give opportunities to even freshers, right? And that is your chance, right, to build your portfolio, because they will give you a lot of projects that the other companies probably might not let you touch as a fresher, right? So that's your opportunity. Use that to your fullest advantage. Join a small company, work over there for 1 year or so, build a very strong portfolio. Don't stop working on your skills. Keep sharpening that blade, right? And when the time comes, you can easily apply for a much larger company and be someone who's learning a totally different set of skills from different set of people, right?
Plus attend meetups like we do.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Get
absolutely.
from people as well.
Back to networking, man. Back to networking.
Yep. Cool. I think that is basically it. Thank you so much for your time. I know we overshot a bit, but I enjoyed the conversation a lot. So I just wanted to keep it going.
Likewise.
Your game looks great, but
Thank
the
you.
actual review for the portfolio
Mm-hmm.
might take a bit. So Aditya,
Mm-hmm.
you can reach out to Huzaifa if you want like a detailed portfolio review of your game as well over on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure if he finds the time, he can help you out over there as well.
Got
Outside
it.
of this, Huzaifa, thank you so much. Loving what you're doing with the open world GTA. It's
Thank
based
you.
on
Thank
mobile,
you.
right?
Yeah, so we are building a game from mobile, and the whole idea is that we are targeting mobile not because we can't do console, or in fact we have made PC games before. It's
Yep.
not actually. It's I believe it's harder to make games for mobile than console or PC, because you have to really worry about how do I run this game on an 8 or 10,000 rupee phone, right? And that is a market, like there's 150 crore Indians who's making games for them, right? So my goal is not to make a game that I make in say Unreal Engine 4, Unreal Engine 5. It's really not, it does not make a difference really. The main thing is that we are going after gameplay, we are going after feel, and for us we really want people to feel that this game was made for them and made for them first, and it's accessible to them so that they can play it on any phone they want. And eventually, we will grow it into a larger franchise that expands across consoles, PC, everything. But we are mobile first because that's where India is, that's where 95% of the market is.
Nice. Cool. So, can we expect any news anytime soon? Is it still too early?
What I can tell you is, in the coming week, we are dropping a teaser of the game,
Nice.
right? So you guys will probably see it on the Hypernova page. Please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, right?
Yep.
And yeah, we will be making a lot of exciting announcements very soon. So please stay tuned for that.
Cool. So, guys, make sure you guys follow Hypernova everywhere: LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube.
We're based in Bangalore. Yeah.
Yep. So, it's based in Bangalore. Any closing thoughts outside of this, Zefa, before we wrap?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've said pretty much whatever I want to say. I'm just going through the questions here.
Yeah.
Some people are asking what engine we are using. We're using Unity, and we have developed a lot of what should I say, internal our own plugins so that we can push Unity to the absolute max. So
Hmm.
it's not Unity, you could say it's heavily modified
Yep.
version of it.
Cool. Thanks. Thank you so much. Enjoyed the conversation. Would love to have you again if you get the time. I'll be in
Absolutely,
touch. Thank
absolutely.
you.
And for anyone who's watched this, I would encourage you to stay connected on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
And if you have anything that you're unsure about when it comes to game design or a career in games, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help.
Okay. Not a
All
lot.
right.